Welcome back to The Price of Business. I am your host, Kevin Price, talking to you about you and your business. I've got the one and only Steve Parkhurst here. He hasn't been on since, I don't think you've been on this year. You were on a few times last year, but hadn't had you on yet in 2012 and want to see you more often. You are a senior editor over at U.S. Daily Review, plus a political consultant and much, much more. Good to see you.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
All right, let's talk a little bit about U.S. Daily Review. You've been involved with it right from the very beginning. Something of a pioneer. I don't know if you noticed, but we're now pushing 1,100 articles starting in August. Really, I did a little in July, a few postings here and there, half of which didn't stick because I didn't know what I was doing. But already 1,100 articles. I think that's quite a bit of traction for, 6 months?
Yeah, it's been a little over 6 months. I think we did the soft launch back in August, which I think was actually the last time I was on the show.
Yep.
And so shortly after that. But yeah, it's it's been something where every day we're getting regular contributions, and so it doesn't take long to figure that at 6 months at 3, 4, 5 articles a day, eventually it adds up to 1,100.
Yeah,
pretty shortly.
In fact, I think just in the last 24 hours we added 2 new contributors that are going to be regular contributors to the site, and they're all providing great content, which we love. When it comes from an editorial approach, like any new website, it tends to be a little bit eclectic in terms of content, and of course, with a general name like U.S. Daily Review, it has to be.
Right.
But we are slowly developing some regular features, one of which is one of my favorites, is your Across the Pond feature that you do pretty much every week, kind of a summary of what's happening in Europe as it's happening in Europe. It's kind of neat. You can tell you're writing it, in fact, when we're largely asleep in this country, or at least government is,
right.
That they're wide awake talking about what is happening their day. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, what I do is, pretty much every day I start combing the news. Basically, Across the Pond just kind of infers out of London, so I read a lot of the British press and just cultivate several articles out of there, and I put together what I think is pretty interesting. I've said before, and I think I said last year when I was on the show, I was here just after the London riots. I kind of talked about the fact that a lot of times what's going on over there is kind of a microcosm of what we're headed for, usually 10, 12, 15 years later. And they're having some really interesting debt issues over there. They're having really interesting tax issues over there, tax problems. They're wanting to start taxing pensions, and it's just not a sustainable economy over there. And, if we're not careful here, I think especially if you listen, in our national debates right now about entitlement reform and stuff like that, it's like we're headed down the same sort of path if we don't change things, and especially change them soon. And so it's interesting. That's why it's kind of a glimpse into the future, so to speak. And so I do it every week, and then I really do it every day. So it's definitely interesting. It's definitely, when I first started this, I didn't know if I could keep up the pace, but the news out of England these days is always so interesting that it's very easy to do it on a daily basis.
It is, and if you watch it carefully enough, you can see that David Cameron, from what I can tell, is trying to leave a very, very big long-term impact and an systemic impact in terms of reform in England. And I don't agree with everything. It's the highest taxes per capita since World War II. Mm-hmm. And you understand why during World War II you would have to have high taxes. I think people are willing to do this. Right. I think that's a rather risky measure. But he's cut spending per capita for domestic spending to World War II type levels per capita. Right. And that's very courageous.
It is, and what's actually most courageous that Cameron has done is he's got a program over there called the Big Society, which in America, if you called something that, I think
of LBJ,
right, and you think you think of actually big government, but actually what they're doing is they're taking the focus away from government, and they're trying to get charities and churches and other organizations to take the pressure off of government and to do these things. And it's very bold, and it obviously has never been proposed over there before. And of course, just like here, when you try to propose like something, the equivalent here would be like the Paul Ryan plan. As soon as Paul Ryan comes out and says anything, well, next thing you know, there's a commercial with an old lady being pushed off a ledge, and the Republicans are going to take away her checks every month.
Reasonable
and all this
debate,
right? Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Reasonable discourse, and so he's facing the same sort of thing over there, where he's being brave enough to say, look, we can't continue to fund people who are just going to live off the system and never actually produce anything for our society or for our city.
So he wants to get nonprofits more involved in those type of things.
And it's not really just nonprofits. He wants to get business leaders to kind of take and be mentors. And he's really tried to, if anybody wants to Google the Big Society, you'll see what I'm talking about, where he's really put out a program that he wants other people to kind of take the reins and do things and not rely on the government.
I love it. I love it. And unlike the Great Society, in which LBJ created a huge paradigm shift in which government was supposed to be in charge of everything, and that just shows you the euphemisms, and the fact that David Cameron's got it right. Society would be that which is outside of government, not that which is in government. Whereas I would guess you could say LBJ, we're trying to make them synonyms, government and society. They're not. In fact, they're often antithetical. Go and read Thomas Paine, and some of his works. Very interesting. And now something that I think to me is kind of disheartening, I would think, for those who are advocates of socialized medicine, Cameron's now trying to privatize aspects of the healthcare program. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, he is, and what's even more interesting about that is over here we had the Sarah Palin portion of the healthcare debate where she talked about death panels, and everybody was up in arms saying there's no such thing as death panels. In the socialized medicine system in the UK, there are death panels.
Yep,
they do have a system where the government is paying, and the government basically reaches a point where they say, we have paid enough for your life, and we don't think you're curable, so we're going to stop paying.
Or at the very least, the amount we receive back won't be equal to the amount we put in.
Right, yeah,
which was the case of my grandfather, who died in Wigan, England, due to the recommendations of a death panel.
Right.
And so they looked at it. He hadn't worked in 5 or 6 years. He was retired, and said, we don't see any economic reason why we would do this. And that's exactly what it comes down to. And they talk about crass economics driving our health care.
Right.
Well, I guess they're at least a little more transparent about it over there, right? As they sit there and look at a form. Sorry, there's not going to be any money coming back from this guy.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It's again, if we're not careful, we're headed down the same path. And
so what specifically, with about a minute left, do you have time to say another segment?
Sure.
So with about a minute left, what are they trying to do specifically in terms of the privatization?
Well, they are trying to they're trying to take the monopolistic approaches of it away from government. They're trying to get it to where they're trying to get doctors, they're trying to get universities, they're trying to get hospitals. They're trying to get them to take more responsibility, and they're also trying to. One of the things that I think is interesting is they're actually trying to empower people who you would think here would be kind of on the lower levels, meaning the hospital personnel and even hospital nurses. They're trying to get them to take a little bit more initiative and to actually, be better stewards of their patients and really move things forward. And so it's taking it away from the government is really what it's coming down to. Is instead of the government making all the decisions, they're trying to get people at every level before the government to make those decisions.
There you go. I like that. All right, Steve Parkhurst is his name. He's one of the senior editors over at usdailyreview.com. Check him out there, and we'll be back with more right after this.